Ready, fire, aim? The administration looking for sure footing on an escalating conflict in Latin America after more questions than answers about the killings of suspected drug traffickers.
I watched that first strike log. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire.
But out of the fog of war, the White House looks for a clearer view of peace in another part of the world.
Even as we speak to you now, Steve Witkoff is in Moscow trying to find a way to end this war.
As Russia uses the stalled peace process to make some of its swiftest gains in years in the Ukraine war, President Trump and his team look to bolster his peacemaker bona fides.
Please welcome the very first winner of the FIFA Peace Prize.
This is truly one of the great honors of my life. We saved millions and millions of lives.
Meanwhile, Democrats get a reality check on the size of the blue wave after a long-shot candidate in Tennessee can't keep tempo with other recent blue team gains. The message from voters was for more moderation. But are Democrats in Washington listening? We'll get to find out this week as Congress rejoins the fight on Obamacare and January's impending government shutdown.
The American people are concerned about the fact that housing is totally out of control, health care is totally out of control, child care is totally out of control, and Republicans have no plan.
That's got the president's attention as he heads back out on the campaign trail with a sales pitch. High prices and a weakening job market are fake news.
The word affordability is a Democrat scam.
Let's get into all of it. With us today, Oklahoma's Republican Governor Kevin Stitt, the chairman of the National Governors Association, Democrat Gabe Amo of Rhode Island, one of the top Democrats on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, plus a little hardball on the state of politics and the press with Chris Matthews. All that and our best in the business panel of journalists. The Hill Sunday starts now. Hello from Washington and welcome to the Hill Sunday. I'm Chris Stirewalt. The U.S. military campaign against suspected drug traffickers off the coast of South America began on September 2nd. Since then, there have been a total of at least 22 missile strikes on boats, killing at least 87 people. But that first attack continues to reverberate here in Washington because of the now infamous, quote, double tap in which the Navy killed survivors of the first strike. A bipartisan phalanx of lawmakers is pressing the administration for more information after seeing video from the September attack. This has prompted a narrative shift from the White House and the Pentagon. The initial bold assertions from Secretary Pete Hegseth have given way to some more legalistic language, in which Admiral Frank Bradley, who leads the Special Operations Command, has been designated as the responsible party and tasked with offering a legal rationale to Congress. The premise seems to be that the shipwreck survivors still posed a threat because they could have been rescued by other drug smugglers. While Bradley tries to thread the needle, Hegseth has taken a step back, saying he left the room for about 5 minutes after the first strike and was only notified hours later. Okay. With us now, Democratic Congressman Gabe Amo of Rhode Island, and he is a member of the Foreign Affairs and Budget Committee, so we have the right person for the job today. Congressman, have you seen the video, and what do we know about what really happened here?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. Look, this is the contradiction of the Trump administration and the Trump presidency, claiming to be a peacemaker, but then bombing without a clear legal authority, perhaps illegally, in the Caribbean on these ships that we don't have clear certainty. Now, I haven't seen the videos myself, but many of my colleagues on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committee have, including my senior senator at home, Jack Reed, ranking member on Armed Services in the Senate. And so what we need is transparency. The solution here to answering these particular questions is a full public airing. Mm-hmm. We need Secretary Hegseth in a public setting in front of Congress. We need Admiral Bradley in a public setting, and we need the video footage in a public setting. The president said there was nothing wrong with the video. So if that's the case, I take him at his word. Let's see it.
So the White House basically, the president is very good at forcing difficult choices on his critics. And so the message is, you're for drug smugglers, right? If somebody says that you're concerned about international law and the rules of war and these things in this case, that he forces Democrats in a choice between, are you taking the side of drug smugglers or are you taking the side of Donald Trump? How do you?
Well, that's preposterous. Right. For Donald Trump, the question is always, am I breaking the law in public or am I breaking the law behind the scenes? That is what I'm forcing upon him. And so the way to answer the questions that are reasonable, the American people are not a nation that will condone acts of war that Congress has not authorized on people where we don't actually know with a full veracity and viewing of the facts that they are conducting activity that is problematic.
How real, though, do you think the Republican upset is here? Like, we're hearing stuff off the record and on background and a lot of agitation. Do you really think that Congress is going to take action here?
Well, you have heard from bipartisan members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats coming together in a time when we're not doing that on a lot of things, to say that this is inconsistent with both our values and the law. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that you're hearing that tells you a lot about this situation and the seriousness with which the administration needs to take it.
Okay, speaking of bipartisan not getting along, the Republicans, after the losses in Virginia and New Jersey, got through the shutdown and then said, okay, we got to do something on health insurance. And a lot of it is going to be messaging legislation, but some of it seems like there's an interest in real legislation. There are Republicans who now say there should be a 1-year or a 2-year extension of these COVID-era Obamacare subsidies. What we're hearing from House Democrats, though, is they don't want it tied to anything else, that you guys just want a clean extension, and a lot of Democrats in the House seem to want a permanent extension. Where are you and how willing you are to deal with Obamacare extension?
Well, after 15 years of trying to gut the Affordable Care Act, I welcome Republicans to the conversation. No more concepts of a plan. We need a plan. Now, there's a very short line here. All of the Democrats in the House are on a 3-year extension discharge petition.
Okay.
You know, that process to force a vote on the House floor. We only need 4 of those Republicans to listen to their constituents, see that 22 million people will not be able to afford their health care. Many of them will drop it and cause real chaos throughout our healthcare system. So they can come over to that. I support a permanent extension, but I personally want to see real action immediately. This is not an academic exercise. In a few weeks, people will not have access to this tax credit, and it will hurt our healthcare system.
But you don't rule out doing a deal with Republicans if they say, we want this plus health savings accounts, or we want this plus something else. Are you willing to have it be part of a cornucopia?
Well, look, one of my phrases in politics is make the main thing the main thing. Mm-hmm. Let us deal with the impending inability of people to pay their health care. And that is what you do by addressing the tax credit. And then if Republicans want to have a real conversation about health care reform, again, every week they've had a plan coming next week. So let this be the week that they actually have a plan, but let's deal with those tax credits now.
We going to have a government shutdown next month?
I hope not. But again, Republicans keep forcing false choices onto our government and, by extension, onto the people we work for. They chose a shutdown instead of dealing with the healthcare crisis that they've magically decided to find solutions to. Let us extend these ACA tax credits, lower costs, save healthcare, fight for our constituents.
Okay, America, if you were from Cucumber Town, which is a real place, it is a real place. You would know him already, but if you don't, here he is, Congressman Gabe Amo. We thank you for your time. Kevin Stitt was elected as the 28th governor of Oklahoma in 2018 and handily reelected 4 years later. He's a conservative Republican from one of the Trumpiest states in the union. Now he has another job. He's chairman of the National Governors Association, one of the few genuinely bipartisan institutions that still draws any water in American politics. So can a conservative from a bright red state build consensus in these divided times? Let's find out. He joins us now from Oklahoma City, the state capital. Governor, thanks for being with us. You've had the gig for just a little bit more than 4 months, and it's a fraught time for relations between the states and between the states and the federal government. You say you want your fellow governors to, quote, step out of partisan corners and into a shared vision. But I am looking at the blue states and the red states, Governor, and I am not seeing a lot of vision sharing going on. What's the idea here?
Well, first off, I really think there's more than you would think when you get two governors from a red state and a blue state together. We actually get along and we like each other, and we're focused on doing best for our states. Like I know you had Matt Myers on from Delaware, and he's a good friend, and sometimes we might disagree about policy, but we don't hate each other. And I think that's important for the American people to see that, governors have a unique perspective, that we're trying to, make sure that we have the best education system, the best infrastructure, health care. We want the best economy for our citizens, best affordability. And so we might disagree how to some of the policy pieces, but yet we can demonstrate that the best ideas come from the states, and that 50 laboratories of democracy are what our founders envision. Instead of a strong federal government where it's a one-size-fits-all, it just doesn't work. And so we need to put the power back in the states, and I think we're going to be better off. And then let the people choose where the best economy is and where the best policies are, and that whether that's in Texas or Oklahoma or Florida or New York or California. And we're closer to the people. And James Madison talked about that in the Federalist Papers. And we just need to get back to that idea that states are closer to the people. And I think when we do that, we can demonstrate to Americans that we are all Americans. We can get along.
Well, you rang my dinner bell there with James Madison, and we were going to talk about that. But I want to talk about a practical political consideration. So you have to build trust with Democrats, and you're trying to do that. But it also sometimes means pushing your fellow Republicans out of their comfort zones and away from the party lines sometimes. The Trump administration is taking a pretty heavy hand with the states. National Guard deployments, overriding state regulations on things like artificial intelligence, even telling states how to draw congressional maps. Now, I look at you, I see somebody who's trying to walk the line. For example, you're sending troops from your National Guard to Washington after the murder of a West Virginia Guardswoman, but you're not sending them to other cities where governors are resisting the president's demands. You have taken some heat from your own side. Talk about how you're approaching these kinds of challenges when it's red and red.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, here's the deal. I mean, we support Oklahoma. All 77 counties went for President Trump, and he's got such a tough job to try to protect these cities that are out of control. Some of these blue cities are just, quite frankly, they're out of control. The crime is unbelievable. So Trump's got a tough job. My point to taking a different stance from kind of the Republican talking points on that was if the shoe was on the other foot, there's no way that a President Biden administration sending California or New York troops into Oklahoma, we would lose our minds. So I'm not going to pit one governor against another, right? So the president has the right to federalize our troops from Oklahoma and send them wherever he wants, or federalize them from Maryland and send them wherever he wants. But I just did not think it was right for one state to send troops to another over the protests of that governor, because that's a dangerous precedent in my opinion, because the president of the United States can enforce that. He can send troops wherever he wants. There's posse comitatus, obviously, where he can't, we're not going to be policing cities, but they can be there for protection. The federal troops in sending troops to Washington, D.C. is totally different. It is a federal enclave. So when the president asked for troops to go there, it was a no-brainer. I always call volunteers, so we have sent 161 volunteers to Washington, D.C. on a 90-day mission because, quite frankly, under the Biden administration, Washington was not safe, and now Trump has that safe. And then you see that attack on that West Virginia National Guard, that was just unbelievable. So we want to support that. We're a law and order party, and we're going to continue that. And I think most Democrats want to protect their cities as well. They just might have I don't know. You'll have to ask them. But there's just a few Democrat governors that are just so against Trump, they're probably running for president, and so they just want to be yinging when he's yanging, and so it makes no sense, and that's why they're losing this. They're losing because American people see right through it.
Yinging when he's yanging. I'm going to steal that, Governor. Okay, now let's get into laboratories of democracy. So this is, as you say, states are competing against each other. And that's important, but it's horizontal federalism. Mr. Madison's system that you talked about also requires vertical federalism in which the states are competing with the federal government for power. It's not enough to divide power between the branches in Washington for the system to work. So what do we do, and you allude to this a little little bit with the Democrats. What do we do about the fair weather Federalists who only stand up for states' rights when the other party is in power?
Yeah, it's an interesting point because I watched your show with the governor of Delaware, and you asked me that question that the Democrat governors obviously are all about federalism when the Republican is in the White House, and then they switch when it's the other shoes on the other foot. And I think that's what I think is really important point that you made there, because we can't have a system that we swing from one pendulum to another based on who's in the White House. And I'll give you an example. You know, when Obama's in the White House, they're killing the Keystone Pipeline, and then Trump comes in and we reinstate it, and then Biden comes back and they kill it again. And finally, the investors and the companies are saying, no more. We're tired of being pulled on this chain and having to invest all these resources to get permits done and get things done. We can't weaponize the justice system. We see people attacking President Trump's businesses and raiding Mar-a-Lago when he's out of office, when a different party's in. And then we can't be a country that swings so far from one pendulum to another, especially on the business side, on the justice side. And I think that's what's frustrating most Americans at this point, that we need to get government out of our lives, let businesses go compete. That's a free market principle. That's why, as the chairman of the National Governors Association, I'm focused on reigniting the American dream. And this idea that it doesn't matter who your parents are, whether you're rich or poor, through the greatness of America and through an education and our free markets, you can go accomplish your dreams. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. That is a bipartisan method, and that's why that's my initiative this year. It coincides with our 250th anniversary of our country, and just really excited to kind of promote that all across the country, this American dream idea.
Okay, right where you are sitting right now, under you is a lot of natural gas and a lot of natural gas pipelines that are taking Oklahoma natural gas all over the country, right? Americans need Oklahoma. But you are trying to bring more businesses into Oklahoma to take advantage of all of the energy that Oklahoma has. You struck a $9 billion AI deal with Google, and this makes a lot of sense in an energy state like yours because the AI disruption is hitting the grid, right? These companies want to go where there's a lot of energy. But and I definitely see the merits there, but how do you think about the other disruption and the disruption in the labor market, especially for younger people, for folks in entry-level jobs or who are in college now and want to get into those entry-level jobs that may get wiped out? How are you yin and yanging on that question?
Yeah, well, I talk about, economic development is really about the 3 Ps, and that's power, permitting, and people. And so those are the 3 things I focus on. I mean, Oklahoma has the power, and you see Google investing $9 billion. Our electricity costs here are cheaper than any other state. And that means we're cheaper than anywhere in the world. I think we're a third of what they're paying in California because we have a free market system. So we can talk about that. But part of that is because we have our permitting rules in line and we can get projects done quickly. That's what companies want. They don't want all the red tape. They don't want all the, our pipeline companies tell me this. This is amazing. Americans need to know this. It costs twice as much to permit a project as it does to actually build it. So think about that. You build your dream home. You save your whole life. You're building a $500,000 house, and it costs you $1 million for the permitting of that house. That's what's happening right now just because of the craziness of the federal government and the permitting problem. So we got to fix that. But this idea of people and labor, and to your point, I believe it comes back to apprenticeships. It comes back to getting kids in the workforce earlier, using high school not only to get them ready for maybe college, but what about all the kids that don't want to go to college? They want to go into the workforce. That's why I took a trip to Switzerland and studied Germany and Switzerland's education model, because they think that workforce education is education. And so that's what we're focused on in Oklahoma is let's get kids more aligned, actually working and showing up on time, saying yes, sir, no, sir, having to punch a clock, so to speak, get an entry-level job, learn a skill. And I think that's going to be transformative for our country if we get out of this idea that the way we've been doing has been working. And bringing AI and technology into learning also is super important and something we're focused on.
See, you surprised me. Okay, America, if you were from Hoot Owl, Oklahoma, you would know him already. Wouldn't it be fun to be from Hoot Owl, Oklahoma? But if you don't, there he is, Governor Kevin Stitt. We thank you for your time. Okay, coming up, it's good news for you politics junkies. The indomitable Chris Matthews is waiting on the other side. We'll talk to him about his new book and the state of politics and journalism today. The Hill Sunday. We'll be right back.
I hope that every American, regardless of where he lives, will stop and examine his conscience about this and other related incidents. This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
That was President John Kennedy addressing the nation from the Oval Office on June 11th, 1963, and it almost didn't happen. Earlier that day, Alabama Governor George Wallace had stood in the doorway of Foster Auditorium at the University of Alabama to block the enrollment of 2 black students after a federal judge had ordered that they be allowed to enroll. After 3 hours, Wallace would stand down, and some in President Kennedy's inner circle thought that he should do the same. But one advisor made sure he didn't. Bobby Kennedy pushed his brother to make that first ever presidential declaration for civil rights and to make it on television. He urged it, he felt it, he understood it, and he prevailed. That was Assistant Attorney General Blake Marshall said later. That vignette is from the new book, Lessons from Bobby. 10 Reasons Robert F. Kennedy Still Matters. And lucky for us, we are joined now by the author, Chris Matthews. He had a bestseller with a previous book recounting his time as House Speaker Tip O'Neill's chief of staff and the relationship between O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. He's author of multiple best-selling books, but you probably know him best as a longtime host of Hardball, one of the longest-running and most influential politics shows on television, which, of course, now you can get your dose of. You can subscribe to Hardball on Substack. Welcome, Mr. Matthews.
That's a great introduction.
It's so great to have you here. When I was new in Washington, you had me on your show, and you were only a little mean to me.
Was I really mean?
No, you were. It was great. It was great. I loved being on your show, and I love that you're here today. Television is powerful.
Yeah.
Robert F. Kennedy understood the power, and in the civil rights fight, showing the dogs attacking, the hoses spraying, all of the indignities.
High school kids.
For all of these indignities was offended the conscience of Northern liberals who had tried to tune out what was going on in the South. Talk about the power of TV and media as Robert Kennedy understood it and as the Kennedy.
Well, certainly we learned that in Vietnam.
Yeah.
With Walter Cronkite every night giving us the body counts, the supposed body counts, which weren't even accurate. I think the look of those young black kids, high school age, risking their lives, basically, those fire hoses were severe, and the dogs biting people. You saw that on television. Bobby Kennedy, to get to your first question, he said it's more powerful to have an item on the ABC News, which was the weakest network at the time, than to have the New York Times.
Yeah.
And that was so amazing. No, are you telling me that the New York Times isn't the most important thing in the world? Yes, he said television is. The television is graphic, visual, and you see it, and you can't forget it.
It's the emotional connection, right?
Yeah.
30 years after that, you changed television. Hardball definitely was part of this change in TV, where normally it was Sunday shows like this, where there's the only place for politics, and politics sort of came into everything.
Yeah.
Talk about the change where politics went mainstream in media and how that happened.
Well, cable television became very powerful because people selected it because they cared about politics and they watched it. Hardball was on, 5 and 7 at night, and we repeat the show at 7. But people at 7 o'clock are used to getting the news.
Yeah.
And there hasn't really been a successor to Walter Cronkite. Nobody's been able to fill that chair, and he was able to say that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And he was able to say when the Vietnam War really turned bad, he said, we'll not do better than a good stalemate here if we're lucky. And it can't be a Pax Americana. It's not going to be our way. It's probably going to be a coalition government. It's probably going to turn red eventually, because we knew what happened in those countries like Laos. But he said that's the best we can do. We've done enough. And that was the end. And that's when Lyndon Johnson said, just to see the power of television, he said, if we've lost Cronkite, we've lost the country.
So the way that, you talk about we're not going to have another Cronkite, one of the things that was great about your show was, look, you're a Democrat, you're a partisan, you are true to the person who God made you to be, you're a Philly guy, you're all of that stuff. It was a pretty respectful conversation, right?
Yeah, well, I wanted Republicans on the show, and certainly I grew up in a Republican family. My father was a real Republican. I mean, I think he voted Democratic for mayor one year because they were giving him a pay raise. But, I mean, I think he went for Barry Goldwater. My brothers are all Republicans. No, two of them are, for sure. Two of them are MAGA. But, and he's already changed it because he doesn't like the Ukraine policy. He thinks that's weak. Yeah, I think I always wanted moderate Republicans. I mean, that's what I grew up with. And I think Pennsylvania Republicans, Eisenhower Republicans, people that are independent, people like Tom Tillis and Cassidy, the senators, and Murkowski, they're standing up right now. They're showing the weakness of Hegseth and, say, Bobby Kennedy Jr. They're acting much more independently, as are grand juries. Mm-hmm. If you're independent out there and you come up with a Letitia James question, you're going to say, no, thank you. I'm not going to prosecute it. I'm not going to support a prosecution. This isn't a ham sandwich. We're not going to do it. And I think we're seeing that around the edges now.
So this will be another bestseller, The Lessons from Bobby. You already had a bestseller with your...
Do you dictate that here? Is that how it works?
This is how it works. Just here. Let me hold it. Let me have it for a second. It's going now it'll be a bestseller.
Well, the big thing, let me just say, the thing I've been thinking about all weekend is the message of Bobby was when he was killed, and they took his body from St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York down to Arlington to join his brother, who's already there because he was assassinated. That was the real legacy of Bobby Kennedy. The black crowd in Philadelphia where 20,000 people spontaneously sang the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And how many crowds have ever done that? And in between, like between Newark and Trenton and Philly, there were white crowds of people, poor whites, I mean, really poor people, who one of them guys he saluted and he lined his whole family up in birth order. And they all stood next to him and saluted it. There was the way that they sang and the way they devoted themselves to Bobby Kennedy was the real legacy of the guy. His ability to appeal to both sides of the racial argument. And he did it because he would drive around Gary, Indiana with the Tony Zale on one side, the middleweight champion, and Richard Hatcher, the first black mayor of Gary, on the other side of him, waving to everybody. Look, I'm with both sides. I want everybody I want to have peace here. And then when he gave, of course, his great speech the night that King was killed, Dr. King was killed in Indianapolis, which is still a showstopper.
Absolutely. Mr. Matthews, we thank you for being here.
Coming.
Great book. Good to have you. Okay, after a rough run, President Trump and the GOP are trying to get back on offense. At the top of the White House wish list, a rebound on the economy. Will voters say naughty or nice when the Hill Sunday returns? With us now, it's our best in the business panel of journalists. You know her, you love her, Margaret Talev. She's a veteran reporter and director of the Syracuse University Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship. Yay. Philip Wegman, he is a White House correspondent for Real Clear Politics. And our friend Molly Ball, she is one of the foremost chroniclers of the Trump era. You've read her in Time Magazine and the Wall Street Journal and every place else, and pretty soon in a much anticipated book. Molly, let's go through the TikTok on drug boats. You see here, we're going to show this big magical chart that's going to say that on September 2nd, the president announced that the strike had taken place earlier in the day. Then Hegseth is braggy. I watched it live. It was awesome. And then we get the Washington Post report that Hegseth ordered the second strike. Hegseth denies it. Trump says he wouldn't have wanted it. Then they say it actually did happen, but Admiral Bradley, not Hegseth, gave the order. Now Hegseth says he didn't stick around. He had stuff to do. This strikes me as significant because it's the first real walkback that we've seen in a big way from this administration. Am I reading it right?
I think that's exactly right. And I think what we have seen is the administration clearly has been put on its back foot by this story. The shifting explanations reflect the fact that they didn't have their story together when they first started talking about what happened here. And the larger issue of all of the boat strikes, right? And this whole campaign and what's going on with the military buildup outside Venezuela, all of this has now sort of come together to become a major controversy because the administration hasn't been clear with the Congress or with the American people about what was going on here, and has actively resisted giving, a complete explanation. And I think they're going to be called on to do that. There's going to be a lot more scrutiny on this, I think particularly for Secretary of War or Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
DBA, Department of War, right?
The artist formerly known as the Secretary of Defense. This is something that has really crystallized a lot of the concerns about his leadership as well.
Phil, look at this. It's Franklin targets the narco-terrorists. Molly's right that for lawmakers, Republicans who want to be hawks, want guys like Tom Cotton, other serious-minded, hard-nosed guys, they're not digging this, right? This is not going to be a sufficient explanation for them. So the White House is making it, and the Pentagon is making it hard for even their allies in Congress to make the case for them.
They are, but Congress reprising its authority, I'm not going to hold my breath here.
Yeah, right.
And the reason I'm not going to is because if you look at the polling picture, we don't have a lot of polling just yet, but 62% of Americans, according to a recent Reagan National Defense study, supported these strikes. And I think that's really interesting right now because thus far, everything that we've seen in the footage that the administration has put out, it looks like it's coming out of Call of Duty or a Jason Bourne movie. It's distant, it's surgical, and what's more of a mainstream issue than blowing up alleged drug boats? Because a lot of people, they say, hey, fentanyl has affected our communities. But that changes when you see the double tap or the follow-up. And Trump has said that he's going to release footage. We'll see if the public changes their mind, and then that pushes Congress to ask for more oversight.
Okay, I'm depressed now, Margaret.
I'm going to make you feel better.
Well, I want to ask you on Ukraine. Which is adjacent here, because the Republicans have said for a long time, we're going to push the administration on. We've heard a lot of Republicans, they've sat on this set, they've said we're going to push the administration on Ukraine. What we have watched instead is Russia is now making some rapid advances. Ukraine, the Zelensky government is in trouble, and it looks like all of that talk is going to end up only being talk, right?
I fundamentally see the boat strike story and the Ukraine story as really different. I think what's going on in the boat strike story is that the president is treating that like a domestic political and domestic security operation, except for it's in international waters with no congressional authorization and no one has any visibility on what's going on. In Ukraine, there's a lot of visibility. You can see it unfolding right before your eyes, but there are real questions about whether this is for the president more of a business and global investment strategy than it is about sort of democracy protection and the future of Ukraine. And I think, if the Republicans in Congress really had a unified view on this and wanted to support Ukraine, they could. 2 words, discharge petition, because they're doing it with everything else. But when it comes to foreign policy, the president has, I think, so far accurately determined that he writes the narrative for his party and that his party will fall in line. And when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, the president has sent his team to make a deal with Russia that Ukraine can get behind. So that, again, it's not happening behind closed doors. It is happening in front of our eyes. We can see what the strategy is.
Molly, a year ago, I don't know that I would have said how much success Mike Johnson and John Thune would have had in getting stuff through. Basically, all of the president's nominee, passe Matt Gaetz. But all the nominees got through. They put through the big reconciliation package. They held serve on the Democrats. Now we're starting to see there's a little friction going on, and we've got Thune and Johnson fighting with each other. We've got Marjorie Taylor, all the way from Marjorie Taylor Greene to Elise Stefanik, now publicly feuding, creating these problems. Is the honeymoon even inside the GOP starting to come to a close?
Clearly it is. But I think you have to understand where all this is coming from. First of all, this is basically the price that Mike Johnson has to pay for the success that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because he has called in every favor, he has pushed every button, he has twisted every arm, and that has created a lot of hurt feelings, and all of that is now coming home to roost because there's not much else that they have to do, and they're trying to do some hard things still. I think second, though, all of this, including the Ukraine stuff and the Venezuela stuff, is tangled up in politics and the lame duck status of the president and the darkening political picture for the Republicans. Now, if you were holding your breath for the Republican Party to declare independence from Trump, you turned blue and died about 8 years ago.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
That being said, there are degrees, and Republicans are going to be more independent of the president the more the political picture darkens for him and for them.
Phil, they've convinced the president to go back out on the road. He's going back out on the campaign trail. It's always Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. And let's look at, here's the president's economic approval rating. And I think this is from the New York Times. The lines are not going in the correct direction. And the lines are not going in the correct direction, particularly with independents, but an increasing number of Republicans. President says he doesn't like to talk about affordability, but he's going to talk about affordability. What's the thinking?
So during the 2024 election, Donald Trump had to be pushed to talk about inflation and the economy when he thought that the whole ballgame was immigration.
Right.
What we saw from exit polls that it was the economy. That's what delivered the White House back for Republicans. This time around, it's a very similar sentiment. Donald Trump wants to point to a booming stock market, low unemployment, and say everything's great. We've run out of mission accomplished moments for him at this point. And so
we're going to have to stop. I've gone on too far. Coming up, Democrats are waxing up their surfboards as they look to ride a big blue wave next year, but are their primary voters going to let them hang 10? We're going to go whole hog when we come back. Hey, look, winning isn't everything, but we have been hearing an awful lot from Democrats about their moral victory in a special election defeat in a bright red district. State Representative Afton Bain lost by about 9 points in a district Republicans had carried by 22 points in the previous midterms. That's a pretty impressive overperformance, until you compare it to what other Democrats have been doing. Blue team overperformance was closer to 16 points coming into this fall when candidates in New Jersey and Virginia crushed expectations. Think of Abigail Spanberger, who improved on Democrats' performance of 4 years ago by 17 points. It's pretty easy to explain. Spanberger is a moderate in a moderate state, and Bain is a Nashville progressive in a district with a bunch of rural voters. So 13 points or 17 points, what's the big whoop? Well, it is a very big whoop indeed if you are the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and you're trying to not just take back the House, but win a big enough majority to make a difference. So we wondered, how many seats fall into that Bain-Spanberger gap? Let's look. Why don't we look? Here are the relevant numbers for the House next year. 435 total, you know that. Democrats need 218 for a majority, you know that too. They currently hold 213. Now look, we're not going to worry about the 33 reddest districts. That's not where Democrats are looking. The first place they're looking are these seats here. You see them here. These are the 96 Republican-held seats with the GOP lean from basically 0 to 10 points. But Democrats won't win all or even most of these. Incumbency, after all, is a hell of a drug. But these are where Democrats are probably going to get to 218. Then there are these seats, these other seats. These are the 54 Republican districts that lean red by 11 to 15 points. The same rules apply, but a candidate like Bain might win if there's an open seat. If the elections were held today, this is where Democrats might get into the 220s. They might get up there into a nicer number. But here is the fatted calf. These are the 37 Republican districts in that 16 to 20 point range. You won't sneak any progressives in there, but you sure could get a Spanberger through. And that's the difference between an okay year like the Republicans had in 2022 and the kind of monster majority Democrats want. Question, will primary voters let Democrats go big? They will if they listen to Rahm Emanuel.
One of the things Democrats have to do is recruit the right candidates, talk about the issues that matter most to people, show them the policies that we have to do, I think, the right by the American people.
Back with us. It's our best in the business panel of journalists. Margaret, we begin with you. I know this is like the most inside Washington thing about parsing the difference between losing by this much or losing by that much.
Losing by 9 or by 5.
Right. Question, though. Are Democrats taking this seriously? Do they understand about the risk and the opportunity and about what they need in their primaries?
Well, you're acting like there's such a thing as Democrats. I mean, there are at least 2 wings of the Democratic Party. So,
right.
But I think if you look, my institute does focus groups with sort of different blocks of voters, and we just, in partnership with Engages, we just did interviews this past week with people who had voted for Donald Trump in 2024, but live in Virginia and New Jersey, and then switch sides to vote either for Spamberger or
you got
for,
the unicorns.
Or for Mike
you
Ashero.
corralled a number of unicorns. What'd they say?
So for them, it was 2 things. It was not necessarily a referendum on Trump, but they don't like the way the economy and that stuff is going. Affordability is a driver for them. And also, they didn't like the Republican candidates very much.
Yeah.
And so they don't like the Democratic Party. They really don't like the Democratic Party at all. But despite their dislike for the Democratic Party, they liked those 2 Democrats better than the Republican alternatives on the ballot. They saw them as common sense, fairly moderate, relatable, willing to buck their own party's progressive wing. That's not every voter. Those are swing voters. So that's not going to turn out young progressive Democrats.
In 2022, Molly, Republicans dropped the bag, right? They could have had a much better year, but they failed. They had bad candidates in a bunch of races, and they wasted an opportunity. I saw Jasmine Crockett has a big announcement coming up on Monday in Texas. What are the chances here that Democrats fumble and that they can't deliver the kind of sort of normie-ish, acceptable alternative candidate?
That's the question that I think the party is struggling with right now. And certainly the Democratic establishment would have preferred to see a different candidate in the Tennessee race.
Yeah.
And that's how I read the result is that with basically the best possible Republican candidate and almost the worst possible Democratic candidate, you still had this 15-point shift.
Right.
And so, yes, they would prefer to not have a Jasmine Crockett be the nominee in that race. And Texas has a very early primary, so that could be an early test of how much the progressive base is turning out for candidates the establishment finds unpalatable, because you can absolutely predict that if she gets in that race, there is going to be a big conversation among Democrats about electability, about what kind of candidates they need to be putting forward in these races for exactly that reason.
Phil, 2028, J.D. Vance is talking about a bunch of very left people, but Josh Shapiro is making some moves. He has things to say about Kamala Harris. When we take the early handicap in 10 seconds, who's your pick for the mainstream Democrat?
Josh Shapiro is looking pretty good. He's tacking towards the center, but of course, magazine writers do not make nominations, so we'll have to see.
But you think Newsom?
Josh Shapiro looks pretty good. Newsom's going to be there for the competition, but no one is in charge. It'll be wide open.
All right, we'll see. We'll have you back. We'll talk about it. Panel, we thank you. Coming up, hail West Virginia. Your almanac is next. This is your almanac for today, December 7th, 2025. Yes, this is the date that lives in infamy. In 1941, forces of the Japanese Empire conducted a surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor on Oahu, Hawaii, killing more than 2,400 Americans and sinking or heavily damaging the bulk of the fleet. It brought the United States into a world war that had been raging for more than 2 years. Public outrage broke the isolationist spirit in America, and it was stories like that of the USS West Virginia. Americans were transfixed by the plight of 3 young sailors who survived the initial attack, but were trapped in a sealed pump room for 16 days. After the battleship reached the shallow harbor bottom, these doomed sailors could be heard crying for help, but there was no way to reach them. Their cries went silent when their rations and breathable air finally ran out. The sailors' remains were recovered about 6 months later as crews worked to salvage the wrecked ship, patching and pumping out the hull. On May 17th, West Virginia was afloat once again. It would be 2 more years before West Virginia was ready to join the fight, and fight she did, tearing across the Pacific in the final year of the war, fighting off the coast of the Philippines and supporting amphibious assaults at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And on September 2nd, 1945, West Virginia had a front row seat for another moment of history. When Japan formally surrendered to the United States, she was the sole survivor of the Pearl Harbor attack, present in Tokyo Bay. So whatever comeback you're mounting this week, we hope it's full steam ahead Until next time.